Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Mr. B. Today we are discussing the latest development in the Iran war. There's a new claim by Marco Rubio that we are the sole superpower in the world. Is that sentiment felt around the world? Well, let's go ahead and see what's taking place. I use First Post as a point of reference, so we will be using them as the leading reporter on this. All right, let's jump into it.
The only major Washington
Donald Trump does not do things quietly. He does them loudly, dramatically, often twice. I'm not saying this out of the blue. Just 2 weeks ago, Trump scrapped an AI executive order hours before signing it. Then, weeks later, he has now signed a different one. It is giving chaos but make it a press release. Well, welcome to American AI policy. Let me break this down for you. For months, Washington had been hinting that Silicon Valley's AI needed guardrails. The White House called in the biggest names in tech, OpenAI Sam Altman, Anthropic's Dario Amodei, to witness what was supposed to be a historic signing ceremony for an AI executive order. After they showed up, Trump cancelled it. His reason? America is leading the world in the AI race, and apparently, Trump did not want to do anything that would get in the way of that.
because I didn't like certain aspects of it. I postponed it. I think it gets in the way of, we're leading China, we're leading everybody, and I don't want to do anything that's going to get in the way of that lead.
Fair enough, but here's the plot twist. Yesterday, he signed an AI executive order anyway, just a different one, a softer one that conveniently the industry wouldn't complain about. The executive order is titled Promoting Advanced Artificial Intelligence Innovation and Security. Innovation and security. Two things that are often in direct tension with each other. Here's what that means. Top AI companies can voluntarily share their most advanced models with the government for safety testing, up to 30 days before public release. Agencies like Defense, Homeland Security, Commerce, and Treasury would be involved in this review. The key word, of course, is voluntarily. No mandatory approvals, no licensing requirements. The framework is, in the White House's own words, a voluntary framework with AI developers. This is not the first draft. The original one was tougher. It proposed a 90-day review window, so 3 months for the government to stress test powerful AI models before they hit the public. Industry officials pushed back. Administration advisors argued 3 months was too long. In a sector where new models drop faster than iPhone updates. So the review window got cut to 30 days. America's competitive edge against China was just the justification. When Trump came into office for a second term, he revoked Biden's AI policies, called them dangerous, a barrier to American innovation. He said the Biden rules would slow down the very industry, America needed to dominate. And now, the core of today's executive order, voluntary agreements to share AI models with federal agencies, leveraging AI for cyber defense, is strikingly, almost embarrassingly, similar to what Biden had already put in place. Trump did not dismantle Biden's AI framework, he rebranded it. The preamble of today's order even boasts that Trump, I'm quoting, unleashed tremendous technological growth by slashing Biden-era bureaucracy, and then, in the very same document, reinstates the very mechanisms he slashed. You really cannot make this up. And while we're talking about contradictions, let's also talk about the CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, the one government body specifically designed to protect America from hackers and digital threats. This executive order relies heavily on the CISA to implement its cybersecurity goals. There's just one small problem. This administration has been systematically gutting CISA for months. So Trump is signing an order to protect America's digital infrastructure while simultaneously defunding the agency meant to protect America's digital infrastructure. Protect America, but with a broken shield. Let's be honest about what this order is actually doing. It's not substantive regulation. The major AI firms already had informal agreements to share models with the government before this order existed. This executive order formalizes what has already been happening. So why sign it?
People keep asking, how do we actually get an AI agent on our team? Well, it's easy. Watch how I do it in 60 seconds on Monday. First,
people, jobs are at risk, data centers are hiking electricity bills, communities are protesting. Public opinion on AI has soured. This executive order lets Trump say, see, I am doing something. To Silicon Valley, it says, don't worry, it's voluntary. To the public, it says, don't worry, there are guardrails. In a way, Trump is targeting both audiences with just one document. The Trump administration's AI policy isn't a strategy. It's a weather wing, pointing wherever the political wind blows on any given day. Build, baby, build, but not too fast. Regulate, but not really. Beat China in AI, but also sell them NVIDIA chips. Welcome to Donald Trump's world. Stay.
Okay, so for the first segment there, you see that Trump seems to be taking some measures to advance AI. I do have something to say about that. Most people who travel abroad say that China's like 20 years ahead of us in terms of technological advancements, things that they're doing. If we're leading the way in AI, why are they 20 years ahead of us in terms of what they're building? So it either means that we're leading the way and we have technology that we're not actually using that is visible to the people so that they know that we have this type of technology, or maybe we only use it in military programs. But China seems to be using their AI to advance the country, like through infrastructure, through building high-speed rails, through building cities and roads in no time, like AI that's actually building roads in a day that we're not actually doing. So I don't understand a lot of times when you see this, you know, the context behind us claiming that we are ahead of other countries like China in AI, when anyone who travels abroad says they're way further ahead of us technologically wise. So where is all our AI developments really going? I mean, I've started to use some of the AI. It's pretty good, but I'm just saying, it doesn't seem like this this claim is a valid one from my point of view, but I could be wrong.
In the artificial intelligence lane, by now you must have heard of the superhuman AI, a system so powerful it is raising concerns of faster, cheaper, and more sophisticated cyber attacks. Congratulations, if you guessed it right, we are talking about Anthropic's Mythos. Well, the AI model just got a lot more accessible, and India is part of that story. Yesterday, the company expanded its project called Glasswing. It was given away to around 150 organizations across more than 15 countries. India is reportedly among those 15 countries. Other countries joining the initiative include the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance and the NATO. Financial heavyweights like SWIFT, the backbone of global banking, identity management giant Okta, South Korean tech titans Samsung, SK Hynix, and SK Telecom have also been granted access. Even the EU's cybersecurity agency is on this list. This isn't just a product rollout, this is a coordinated, geopolitically deliberate deployment of one of the most sensitive AI tools ever built. Now, what is this project? Launched by Anthropic, Glasswing gives selected government security agencies and technology firms access to its powerful Mythos AI model. The goal here? Find and fix critical software vulnerabilities before cyber criminals can exploit them. The project includes major tech and security players, including big tech companies, Amazon, Apple, Google, and Microsoft. And now India has joined the global cyber elite. Here's what makes this inclusion genuinely remarkable. India is not part of the Five Eyes. India is not a NATO member. These are the Western intelligence alliances that historically define who gets access to sensitive technology first. Yet, India has been brought into Project Glasswing alongside them. This is not a small thing. India is simultaneously one of the world's largest digital economies, a rising hub for AI development, and a country facing escalating cyber threats, targeting its banks, government systems, and critical infrastructure. Anthropic itself noted that for most participating organizations, a major cyber attack could impact more than 100 million people. In India's case, that number isn't hypothetical, it's conservative. Access to Mythos means Indian institutions in finance, healthcare, power, water, communications could now identify and patch vulnerabilities at a speed and scale previously impossible. India isn't just joining a cybersecurity program. It is being recognized as critical infrastructure for the digital world. But it's not so black and white. This is the same model that has rattled global bankers and cybersecurity experts. Unlike basic AI models, which help you write emails, summarize documents, Mythos was built for one very specific, very high-stakes job: finding holes in softwares before the bad guys do. Think of it as a digital bloodhound. You point it at a code base and it sniffs out vulnerabilities and weaknesses in that system that hackers could exploit to cause real damage. And here's where it gets remarkable. When Anthropic first tested Mythos in April, it didn't just find a few bugs, it found thousands of them in a short period of time. The kind of work that would take human cybersecurity teams months, Mythos did in days. So if Mythos is this good at finding vulnerabilities, imagine what happens if the wrong people get their hands on it. That's exactly what kept Anthropic up at night. The same tool that helps a bank patch its security gaps could help a hacker exploit them. The same AI that strengthens a power grid could be used to map its weakest points. This is what security researchers call a dual-use dilemma. And with Mythos, the stakes are extraordinarily high. The hype surrounding Anthropic's model reached such a fever pitch that some critics accused the company of selling the apocalypse before it had actually arrived. So the AI firm did something unusual, for a tech company at least. It said no to a public launch. Thus came Project Glasswing, and thus came India's inclusion to the project. It's a calculated move to release the model just enough that it does not land in the hands of the bad people. What makes this story important is not just the AI model itself, but what it represents. For years, the internet was built on openness. But the AI era is changing that philosophy. Now, the most powerful technologies are being tightly controlled, selectively distributed, and treated almost like strategic assets. And India being included in that circle tells us something important about where the country stands in the emerging AI order. Because cybersecurity is no longer a back office technical issue. It is a national security issue. It is economic stability. It is geopolitical leverage. The countries that can secure their digital infrastructure in the AI age will shape the balance of power in the decades ahead. And those that cannot may discover that in the modern world, the fastest way to destabilize a nation is no longer through its borders, but through its servers.
It's not an Iran challenge, it's a global challenge. We remain the world's sole global superpower, the most powerful country on earth.
The United States calls itself the world's only superpower. At least that is what Secretary of State Marco Rubio thinks. This week, Rubio told lawmakers that America remains the world's sole global superpower. He pointed to America's military strength, its economic clout, and the dominance of the US dollar. He also delivered a tough message to Iran: reopen the Strait of Hormuz, return to talks, and accept the reality of American power. Listen to this.
We remain the world's sole global superpower, the most powerful country on earth. We have the largest economy. We have the most formidable and powerful military ever known to man, by the way. Our dollar remains the reserve currency of the world.
All right, let's test that claim. If the United States is indeed the world's only superpower, I wonder, why is Iran still standing? Why has Tehran survived decades of sanctions, multiple military confrontations, and one of the most aggressive pressure campaigns in modern history? Has the current war actually weakened Iran, or has it made some of its most powerful institutions even stronger? Here's why I ask this. Both the United States and Iran have signaled that they do not want to return to full-scale war. And despite the rhetoric and military tensions, back-channel talks and diplomatic contacts have not stopped. Yes, the United States still has an overwhelming naval and air power within striking distance of Iran. And yes, Iran is almost certainly using the ceasefire to reorganize, rearm, and repair damage caused by US and Israeli strikes. Already, US intelligence assessments now suggest that despite months of war, Iran has been able to preserve much of its military capability. Intelligence and satellite reviews show that Iran still retains an estimated 70 to 75% of its pre-war mobile missile launchers and roughly 70% of its missile stockpile. Iran has also reopened many of the underground tunnel entrances.
The perfect domain tells your brand story. Grab it now on Wix and go from.
And restarted parts of its military industrial base. That includes drone assembly and missile production. By America's own admission, then, Trump administration's words do not match the ground reality. Now, the tension in and around the Gulf remains high, and that creates a real risk of miscalculation on both sides. For now, US is trying to keep the pressure on Tehran, hoping that the threat of overwhelming military force will push Iran towards concessions. Meanwhile, Iran is also making its response equally clear. It has no intention of negotiating from a position of weakness. Tehran says its military capabilities survived the war, its regime remains intact, and any new escalation could put US bases and critical infrastructure across the Gulf at risk. For both sides, the immediate objective is no longer a grand bargain. It is to keep the ceasefire alive and create a pathway for further talks. But even that is proving complicated. Israel's warning that it could resume strikes in Lebanon has complicated the entire picture. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has never hidden his opposition to any deal that leaves Iran's regional networks in place. So America can't even rein in its own allies. Iran, for its part, continues to back its regional proxy group Hezbollah and insists that any broader understanding with Washington would require an end to Israel's military operations in Lebanon. All this leaves Trump in a rather difficult position. He wants the Strait of Hormuz reopened, he wants energy markets stabilized, and he wants a diplomatic breakthrough, especially as American consumers start feeling the heat of this war. But the price for any breakthrough may include concessions that many in the United States are unwilling to accept. That is the Trump administration's dilemma. Trump and Netanyahu went to war believing that just brute force and overwhelming military power would force Iran to back down. It is not. The Islamic Republic absorbed the strikes, preserved much of its capability. It continues to negotiate on its own terms, which brings us back to Rubio's claim. The United States of America may well be the world's most powerful military power, but what is power without control? Because defeating an opponent is one thing, forcing it to surrender is another. And despite all of America's power, Iran is still standing.
That is a valid point. What is power without control? Do you really have power if you can't control the outcome? And I think that's what's actually happening here, is that the US is projecting this boastful, powerful rhetoric, but in reality, it's not translating into the results that one would expect to see based on the rhetoric that's come out. Obviously, we don't want to be in a conflict, but our leaders have decided that that's what's best to address a threat that they say is imminent, but most people don't think is imminent. But the problem is some miscalculations on the part of our leaders, because we're now in a standoff with the Iranian regime over the Strait of Hormuz, which controls a lot of the oil's energy resources. So for that very reason, I think it creates some challenges. But I don't think it serves the Trump administration to make these claims out loud, because anyone can question it based on the results and the outcomes that they're seeing. We have not been great at getting the said outcomes. All this will be done in whatever time frame, and it continues to linger. Right, we've put a lot of sanctions on a lot of countries like Russia and Iran, and they're still standing. They're still thriving, actually. And so it starts to see that the things that we've done are not exactly deterring the world, and instead, what it's doing is creating alternate solutions. Right, BRICS is now an alternate structure that people can start to do business in. And there's workarounds with AI and Bitcoin where people have been demonstrating that they can make payments and still survive outside of our financial system. And even though we're fighting to protect that right, we're still in a position that's kind of awkward. So like it's not projecting to the world that we have that type of power and control over everything. Now, we still do have a significant amount of control. It's just that at this point, I don't think it's translating the way we think it is to others. So yes, there's truth that we spend the most in military. There's truth that we do have a lot of military capabilities. We are probably a strong superpower that most people wouldn't want to contend with. But we do have to also acknowledge that there are other superpowers in the world, China being one of them, obviously Russia being another. Then you have India that's emerging, and you have a number of other places that are standalone power centers like Iran, and they're proving to be formidable powers on their end of the world. So I think it's a little presumptuous for Marco Rubio to say that, but then again, what do you expect him to say? Naturally, he's going to come out and he's going to, in the middle of a hearing, say things that projects power and strength, even though I don't know that he truthfully believes everything that he's saying, but he said it anyway. So let's go ahead and continue.
The Gulf is once again on edge. Iran has targeted Kuwait and Bahrain, two key American allies in the region, after what it claims were US strikes on Iranian assets near the Strait of Hormuz. Airports. India has now condemned the attack and confirmed that one Indian citizen has been killed in the incident. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has warned Iran of playing with fire after the strikes. Iran is meanwhile sending a warning to every Gulf country hosting American forces. If the US territory uses your territory, you could become part of the battlefield. Here's our report.
America and Iran have been fighting a war that has now continued for more than 3 months. And caught in the middle are Donald Trump's allies in the Gulf. Because when America attacks Iran, guess who Tehran fires back at? Kuwait, Bahrain, the UAE. In the early hours of Wednesday, Kuwait and Bahrain woke up to the sound of sirens amid a deadlock in diplomatic efforts to end the war. Since the conflict began in February, Iran has targeted several countries across the Gulf that house US military bases. The attacks took a backseat after a ceasefire was announced on April 8th. But the latest strikes have raised concerns of another full-blown conflict. Here's a look at what happened recently. Kuwait said Iranian missiles and drones had hit the country's international airport on Wednesday morning. The incident prompted authorities to suspend flight operations briefly. Hours later, Iran's Revolutionary Guards claimed an attack against Kuwait. Tehran said it hit the Ali Al Salem air base in Kuwait, which hosts American helicopters. An Iranian drone also targeted a passenger terminal in Kuwait's international airport. The incident left several injured and one dead. According to Iranian state media, Tehran's military also fired missiles and drones at an airbase and the headquarters of the US Fifth Fleet in Bahrain. Kuwait's military dubbed the attack on the airport an act of criminal Iranian aggression. But Iran accused the US of provoking the strikes. It said the attacks were in retaliation of US strikes on an island. The island in question is Iran's Qeshm Island, located near the Strait of Hormuz, an important waterway that carries a fifth of the world's oil and gas. It is believed to house underground missile storage facilities. The US also reportedly struck an Iranian oil tanker near Hormuz. Iran says the tanker's engine room was damaged. So who hit whom first? Today's escalation appears to have begun with the US hit on the Iranian oil tanker. Washington says it shot down the Iranian drones fired at ships and then hit Qeshm Island. Iran then hit back by firing at Kuwait and Bahrain, accusing them of allowing the US military to use their territory. Tehran said Kuwait and Bahrain bore direct and clear responsibility for the attacks. The military advisor to Iran's Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei has warned of more missile and drone strikes if the United States renew its attacks on Iran. And now the UAE is calling on Gulf countries to unify. The UAE's presidential advisor Anwar Gargash said in a post on X that this aggression does not just target one country, it targets everyone. Rightly so, because these attacks are no longer theoretical security concerns. They are landing on airports, threatening civilians, and disrupting economies. Yet, amid all this escalation, Donald Trump has added another twist. The US president has said he would like to meet Iran's Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei. The problem is, missiles move faster than negotiations. And right now, the Gulf is trapped in a dangerous cycle. Strike, retaliation, interception, warning, repeat.
From actual wars, let's turn to trade wars. And in both cases, the instigator is the same. I'm talking about the United States. Because in the last 24 hours, the United States has launched a dual offensive against India. One economic, the other diplomatic. Let me tell you about the first offensive. US President Donald Trump wants to slap India with more tariffs. The US Trade Representative, who reports directly to the White House, has released a massive 92-page report accusing at least 54 countries of unfair trade practices. India is on that list, but who else? Washington has named countries like the UK, Vietnam, Taiwan, China, Canada, Mexico, and even Pakistan. The United States has accused India and others of failing to ban imported goods made by forced labor. And because of this, the Trump administration wants to levy an additional 12.5% tariffs. This is on top of the 18% tariffs already in place against India. Look at the timing, though. These new tariffs didn't drop out of thin air. They appear deliberately timed, coinciding with high-level trade negotiations between India and the United States. In fact, the trade delegation from the United States is still in New Delhi. So on one hand, the United States is negotiating, and on the other, it is threatening more tariffs. The playbook is obvious. Fire a warning shot and hope that New Delhi concedes. Beyond these optics, let's dive further into the allegations. The United States isn't saying that Indian goods are made with forced labor. They are penalizing India for not having policies that ban the import of goods that could be made with forced labor. It seems like a bizarre territory.
Entrepreneurs have one thing in common. They take the uncomfortable step.
I do 5 things that make me so absolutely.
As I mentioned earlier, it's still. So let me tell you about the second offensive now, the diplomatic one. If the tariff threat wasn't enough, enter Marco Rubio, testifying before the Senate. Washington wants to end Russian oil waivers by the 17th of June. Listen to what he said.
But my question for you is, can you commit not to extend the general license again when it expires on June 17th?
Well, that ultimately is a decision that's made by Treasury, but I will tell you, it depends on the circumstances at the time. We would like to end it as soon as we possibly can because the underlying policy of this country has been to sanction their oil. These are time-limited waivers for the purpose of opening up more global supply.
Rubio didn't name India, but the message is clear because India is among the top buyers of Russian oil. Ending the waiver means that Indian refiners would face US sanctions for buying Russian oil. That would impact India's oil needs and exports of refined crude. The outcome would certainly not be in favor of New Delhi. So let me refresh Mr. Rubio's memory. Why was the Russian oil waiver granted in the first place? Because the United States' war on Iran choked nearly 40% of global oil supply, and because American actions spooked the global oil markets. So these waivers were not charity. They were a necessity to save the global economy from collapsing. If India hadn't purchased the Russian oil, global crude prices would have skyrocketed to $150 a barrel. That would have triggered global recession and decimated the American consumer economy. If anything, the Trump administration should thank India for stabilizing crude prices. Now, Rubio was in India just last month, and throughout his 4-day visit, he called India an important strategic partner. Listen to this.
India is an important strategic partner of the United States, one of our most important strategic partners in the world. As we have a strategic alliance between the United States and India, it's a strategic alliance between two countries that have global influence and the ability to influence global events. And that distinguishes it from other relationships.
Fast forward to today, and the US wants to put tariffs on India and end the Russian oil waiver. Let's cut through the noise. This is a classic case of American strong-arming. But here's what Washington fails to realize. India does not take marching orders. New Delhi's response has been clear, measured, firm. When it comes to tariffs, India says the trade disputes must be resolved through popular bilateral channels. On Russian oil, India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar has repeatedly stated that India will follow a policy of strategic autonomy. So India will find ways to fulfill its energy needs, even if that means buying Russian oil. The bottom line is that the US needs a reality check. You cannot build a resilient partnership with tariff threats and Russian oil ultimatums. India is a strategic partner, not a client state. So America loves lecturing the world about merit. But every now and then it forgets to look itself in the mirror and forgets everything it preaches. This week, a former US ambassador appointed by Donald Trump decided to explain why Indian Americans are more successful and earn more than most Americans. And her explanation was extraordinary. Listen to this.
Indians in America make twice as much as American-born citizens. It's because we come from a high-trust society with Christian values. But when you get people from foreign cultures based on corruption, they bring it with them.
So according to her, American-born citizens come from a high-trust society rooted in Christian values, while visa holders come from cultures built on corruption. That's a pretty big claim, especially when you are talking about millions of people. And if that was not enough, she also suggested that some immigrants obtain fake degrees and that high-skilled visa holders cannot always be trusted. She was referring to H-1B visa holders, a category dominated by Indian professionals. Then comes this part.
Laying off American workers, but hiring hundreds or thousands of visa holders, but they are not just H-1B. Indians specifically helping each other with answers, and that is illegal in America.
Now that is a serious allegation. So let me ask a simple question. Where is the evidence? Because for a country built by generations of immigrants, America spends a remarkable amount of time treating them as the problem, particularly when those immigrants start out-earning, out-studying, out-competing everyone else. Sounds like a case of sour grapes to me. But before I talk about culture, let us also look at the facts. Indian Americans are among the most successful immigrant communities in the United States. They have some of the highest educational attainment levels in the country. Nearly 8 out of 10 adults hold at least a bachelor's degree. Their median household income is over $151,000, far above the national average. Indians in America are heavily represented in science, technology, medicine, and academia. Today, the CEOs of some of America's most influential companies have Indian roots. America loves talking about merit until immigrants start winning. Then suddenly success becomes suspicious. And here is the irony. Despite all their success, Indian Americans are also among the communities facing growing racial hostility in the United States. Reports suggest nearly half of Indian Americans have experienced some form of discrimination. Anti-immigrant rhetoric, political polarization, and the endless H-1B visa debate have turned Indians into a convenient target. Researchers tracking online hate have documented a surge in racist and xenophobic content directed at Indians. In 2025, researchers at the Center for the Study of Organized Hate documented nearly 2,700 posts online promoting racism and xenophobia against Indians and Indian Americans. In October alone, think about this. One day, you're held up as proof of the American dream. The next day, you're accused of stealing jobs, being better paid, and bringing corruption. Whatever happens to be politically useful. And that is the trap of the so-called model minority. The good immigrant, the hard-working immigrant, the immigrant who gets good grades, keeps his head down, and never complains. You're welcome as long as you stay useful. The moment you become too successful, things change. And that's not all. Since we're on this topic, let's talk about another side of this hypocrisy, the expat versus immigrant divide. Have you ever noticed this? When an American moves to Dubai, he's an expat. When a British executive moves to Singapore, he's an expat. When a European professional moves to India, he is an expat. The word expat, it all sounds so sophisticated, global, successful, doesn't it? But when an Indian engineer moves to California or an Indian doctor moves to New York, they're called an immigrant. Why? There's no technicality to this. Let's be honest, it is racial. One group is seen as exploring, contributing positively to the world. The other is seen as arriving to take something from it. And when the reality is often the exact opposite. Because in America, H-1B visa holders are not randomly picked off the street, despite what they want you to believe. They are some of the most highly screened professionals in the world. Indian Americans contribute hundreds of billions of dollars in taxes. They help power the US technology industry. They lead Fortune 500 companies. They create jobs, treat patients, teach students, run Silicon Valley. These are people who spent years earning their qualifications, not people coasting through a system. So when someone suggests that Indian success is somehow the product of corruption, they're not just insulting Indians. They are dismissing decades of achievement, decades of sacrifice, and decades of contribution to the United States. The truth is, America's greatest strength has never been its geography. It has been its ability to attract talent from every corner of the world, including India. And if there is a lesson here, it is this. You cannot celebrate immigrants when they build your companies and then smear them when they start competing with you. You cannot praise merit and then question it the moment an immigrant succeeds. And you certainly cannot claim the moral high ground while making sweeping generalizations about millions of people. Because talent does not have a passport, excellence does not have a skin color, and success does not need anyone's permission, not even America's.
That is a valid point. That is a very valid point. It is true. I'm particularly drawn to the point she made about the phrasing. If a European, a Westernized person moves to Dubai or one of these places, they're viewed as expats. But it's true, when someone of a color or something like that moves to this country, they're not necessarily viewed as expats. I've never actually even thought of it that way, but I think it's a very valid point. We should have a similar perspective on people coming in to add value to the country through their skill and their labor, not for them to be viewed as immigrants, but more so to be viewed as expats as well, because they are contributing to society. So I think the argument is a fair one. And I think it's something that does need to be reanalyzed. And it really depends on who's framing the discussion and how they filter and see the world. I think what's been in effect as of late has been assigning labels to people in an unfair manner. Now, I am for, people following our immigration laws. I do believe the president has a part to play in making sure that he enforces those laws. And I do believe that there's supposed to be a process that's protected and honored across the board. That being said, I don't think it is fair to isolate certain groups of people and to characterize them as one thing when they're perceived as something totally different abroad, right? So when we go abroad and we start companies and we're viewed as expats, but if somebody came from their country to do that here, they're not. That I think she made a valid point that actually won me over on that. I think it's fair for her to question that, and I think that something does need to be done to kind of even the playing field on that, because the perception, again, it's all about perception, right? You don't want people perceiving that there's some sort of bias that you have towards them, solely because of whatever differences they have, whether it's a natural born difference or a difference in thinking or way of life. And especially because we do not pride ourselves on discriminating against others. We are the melting pot of the world. So if that is indeed our position, then we should live up to that. And I know some people have abused that, but there are instances where, there's a disconnect between what we say, our rhetoric, and what we do. And, this was a very interesting point that I think is valid.
Now let's turn to the war between Russia and Ukraine, which has turned into an all-out brutal math-driven war. Yes, math. About which side will run out of weapons first. Right now, Russian President Vladimir Putin is hosting an international investment forum. This is in the city of St. Petersburg. The Kremlin is calling it the Russian Davos. But as the delegates arrived, Ukraine struck buildings and facilities behind this venue. This comes after Russia launched one of its largest aerial bombardments of Kyiv in this war. So why is Russia hitting Kyiv now, 4 years into the war? The answer is simple. Ukraine's stockpile of interceptor missiles is depleting. Our next report tells you more. While the world is distracted with elections, scandals, artificial intelligence, and heat waves, a brutal meat grinder war between Russia and Ukraine has gotten bloodier. Just look at the contrast. In the city of St. Petersburg, Russian President Vladimir Putin is hosting an international investment and economic summit. They're calling it Putin's Davos, a lavish, high-profile gathering of millionaires, tech giants, and corporate executives looking to do business with Russia. The message is loud and clear. Western sanctions have failed and Russia is not isolated. But in the background, one can see the realities of war. Just as the delegates gathered, Ukrainian drones struck buildings and oil refineries near the venue. Large plumes of smoke were visible, almost casting a shadow over the summit. This comes one day after Russia's swift and dramatic attack on Ukraine. More than 700 projectiles, including drones and missiles, were launched. The target, the capital city of Kyiv.
I'd like to remind you of the statement from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which said that our responses will be systematic in nature, and indeed they already are. That's the first point. As for the strike specifically, information about them is entirely the prerogative of regional authorities and the Ministry of Defense.
So why is Russia hitting Kyiv so relentlessly? And why now? The answer is simple and terrifying. It's math. Ukraine's stockpile of interceptor missiles is nearing depletion. The 600 missiles donated to Ukraine since the start of the war have almost all been fired. What's worse, no new interceptors are coming in because these missiles are only made by the US and they've run out of stock. To stop ballistic missiles, you cannot use anti-aircraft guns or cheap kamikaze drones. You need sophisticated, multi-million-dollar air defense systems like the American Patriot systems. These systems have three components that work together. The radar detects and tracks a launch of a projectile. The control room passes on the information to a forward deployed team. And then the launch station fires the interceptor missile towards the incoming projectile. But that does not guarantee success. It's like hitting a bullet with a bullet. We've seen how the American Patriot systems were defeated by Iranian drones and missiles. In fact, the US had to bring additional Patriot systems from Germany and Japan to defend its assets from Iranian attacks. And reports suggest that the US has used up more than 50% of its entire interceptor stockpile. It is now hoarding the remaining missiles. And this worries Ukraine. You see, the US only makes 600 Patriot interceptor missiles each year, both for itself and its partners. And the war in Iran has severely dented its stockpile. That means Ukraine is not receiving any more interceptors, and Putin is making the most of it. Russia is now launching waves after waves of aerial attacks to deplete Ukraine's remaining interceptor stockpiles. They're hitting Kyiv because they know the shield is thinning. But this isn't contained to Ukraine. It has triggered panic across Europe, particularly after Russian drones violated Romanian airspace last week. Like Ukraine, Europe too relies heavily on these Patriot systems made by the United States. Countries like Poland, Sweden, Germany, the Netherlands, Greece, and Spain all depend on the Patriot for anti-missile defense. Meanwhile, Gulf states like the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Bahrain have already depleted their interceptor stockpiles and are demanding more from Washington. With each interceptor missile costing $3 million, ramping up the production will take years, if not decades. And with the US having the capacity of only making 600 interceptors a year, countries like Ukraine, that are heavily dependent on Washington, are now extremely vulnerable.
Struggling to build your sales pipeline? Finding the best prospects feels impossible? Meet Katie, your AI SDR agent. Katie uses 50+ data sources and buying signals to find your ideal prospects and prioritize those with the highest buying intent. Using research data and buying signals, she crafts hyper-personalized messages and makes targeted calls, reaching prospects across multiple channels in 20+ languages 24/7. Let Katie build your sales pipeline so your team can focus on closing deals. Start with Katie today.
And Kushner has been taking them. Now, Kushner wants to build a luxury resort in Albania's protected coastline. For context, this is a small Balkan country, population 3 million, NATO member since 2009, European Union candidate state located on the Adriatic coast, directly across the sea from southern Italy. On Tuesday, thousands of Albanians took to the streets. They gathered in the capital, Tirana.
We can see that we don't talk anymore about how this project will affect the site, because here are planned big buildings, big residential houses, and we are talking for a new city. So in this stretch of kilometers of land, of wildlife habitat, we plan to build a new city. It's declared 10,000 rooms, and what we hear now, it's even more. So there we won't have any more the protected area. The delta of Vjosa is completely being destroyed.
It was the second consecutive day of protest. They chanted Albania is not for sale. They held banners reading Ivanka go home. Their target was the project, the luxury resort project linked to Kushner. That they say threatens protected natural land and was approved without consultation or transparency. Albania's prime minister has defended the project.
There is no chance that this investment will stop as long as I am here. And in the meantime, I am absolutely open, as I have been on other occasions, to discussing it with anyone who has concerns.
Now, Kushner announced plans to build the resort in 2024. The project envisages 10,000 hotel rooms across roughly 2.5 square kilometers of land in two specific locations. Location 1, Sazan Island, an uninhabited island in the Adriatic Sea, belonging to the Albanian state, located near the port city of Vlora. Location number 2, Vjosanata. This is a protected coastal landscape in the south, home to rare bird species and biodiversity that environmental groups have spent years trying to protect. The project had been controversial since 2024. In early May, excavators began clearing pine forests and dunes to open new access roads and construction sites. Barbed wire fences were erected, blocking public access to the beach. Then came the video. Footage circulated on social media showing private security guards dragging a demonstrator along a cliff during a weekend protest at the site. The video went everywhere. Albanian authorities responded. 2 private security firms had their licenses revoked, and 1 guard was arrested. The local police chief was stripped of his duties. 15 protesters were charged, but the protest grew. Then Ivanka Trump spoke and made things significantly worse. Ivanka described Sazan Island as a private island they had discovered. Sazan is not a private island. It is Albanian sovereign territory, an uninhabited island that has belonged to the Albanian state for generations. So the word discovered, that did not go down well. The Ivanka Go Home banners appeared shortly after. And then came the most significant development. Albania's Special Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office announced it had opened a formal investigation into the funds used for acquiring the land connected to the project. This is Albania's most powerful anti-corruption body. It was established specifically to tackle high-level corruption and organized crime. Its involvement is not routine. It means investigators believe there are grounds to examine. And here's what makes the story bigger than one resort. In 2025, Affinity Partners was involved in a large-scale development project in Serbia. It was dropped following controversy and investigations by local anti-corruption authorities. Same pattern, different country. A Kushner-linked development in a Balkan country. Questions about process and transparency. A corruption investigation. Project abandoned. Albania is now following the same sequence. Kushner is a private citizen. He is allowed to run a business. Nobody disputes that. During Trump's first term from 2017 to 2021, Kushner served as a senior White House advisor. He had significant influence over West Asia policy and relationships with Gulf governments. When Trump left office in 2021, Kushner set up an investment firm called Affinity Partners, the same company I spoke about earlier. Within months, Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund invested $2 billion into Affinity Partners, despite a panel of fund managers raising concerns about the investment. Qatar invested $500 million. The UAE provided further capital. But here's the question Albania is raising. When a government approves construction in a protected area for a project linked to the sitting American president's son-in-law without public consultation, without transparency, and the anti-corruption body opens a formal investigation, is that normal business? Or is access to the White House being quietly converted into construction permits? For centuries, companionship was one of the few things money could not reliably buy. China put that theory to test. Welcome to China's loneliness economy. In China, a rapidly growing companion economy allows people to pay for company during activities that could be wanting to eat hot pot, travel, exercise, hospital visits, everyday errands. The industry is estimated to be around 50 billion yuan or $7.4 billion in 2025. What was once a favor from a friend, a neighbor, or a family member is increasingly becoming a service that can be booked, scheduled, and paid for. At first glance, it sounds like one of those stories that exist mainly to make the rest of us feel better about our own society. People paying strangers to join them for dinner? Surely modern life has finally jumped the shark. But really think about it. And a more uncomfortable reality begins to emerge. The companion economy is not really about companionship. It is about scarcity, specifically the growing scarcity of time, attention, and human presence. In an age where we perpetually are overstimulated, we are yet victims of scarcity. Researchers in China have linked the industry's rise to growing demand for what they call emotional consumption spending. Spending aimed not at acquiring things, but at fulfilling emotional and social needs. Young people are living further from family networks. Work consumes more of their waking hours. Friendships become harder to maintain as people move cities, switch jobs, and build increasingly fragmented lives. Ironic, isn't it? In a world where we are more connected than ever, we are struggling to find real connections. The result is that many forms of social support that once existed naturally now require planning, coordination, effort. And an effort, as it turns out, is something many people feel they have already spent elsewhere. Paid companionship offers something that real relationships often cannot, and that's certainty. Friendships are rewarding, but they are also unpredictable. People are busy, plans fall through, messages go unanswered. Social interactions carry the possibility of disappointment, rejection, simply bad timing. A paid companion removes much of that uncertainty. The arrangement is straightforward. Expectations are clear. The person shows up. It is companionship operating with the reliability of customer service. The demand side of the equation tells one story, the supply side tells another. China's prolonged employment challenges among young people have contributed to the growth of flexible work. Official figures show there are now more than 200 million flexible workers across the country. As traditional employment becomes harder to secure, many people have turned to platform-based work, side gigs, service roles that would have seemed unusual only a decade ago. The companion economy sits at the intersection of these two trends. One group needs connection, another needs income. The market simply introduces them to each other. Perhaps the most revealing corner of the industry involves neither young professionals nor tourists, but the elderly. China's population is aging rapidly. More than 300 million people are now over the age of 60, and that figure is expected to rise significantly in the coming decade. At the same time, hospitals and public services have become increasingly digital, requiring patients to navigate online registrations, self-service chaos, or QR codes, complex appointment systems. For many older citizens, particularly those living alone or far from family members, these systems can be overwhelming. Companions have emerged to bridge that gap. They help patients navigate hospital corridors, manage paperwork, collect test results, and communicate with doctors. In many cases, they provide something even more valuable, reassurance. The service exists because a practical problem needs solving. But it also exists because an emotional one does. That distinction matters because it points to the larger story unfolding beneath the surface. The companion economy is evidence that modern societies have become remarkably efficient at producing wealth while becoming less effective at producing connection. For decades, economic progress has been measured through productivity, growth, and technological advancement. Yet many of the institutions that traditionally generated social bonds, extended families, stable communities, local neighborhood networks, and lifelong workplaces have weakened under the pressures of mobility, urbanization, modern work. When people begin paying for presence, what are they actually buying? I would argue that China's companion economy is not an anomaly. It is an early indicator, a glimpse of what happens when societies become wealthier, busier, and more connected than ever before, while simultaneously struggling to provide one of humanity's oldest needs, the need for someone to simply be there. Hollywood used to have a pretty simple hiring policy. Go to film school, make indie films, do the festival circuit, try to find a producer to bankroll the promotions and distribution, and maybe, just maybe, you get to direct a big Hollywood production. But Gen Z has other ideas. The new path to Hollywood appears to be start a YouTube channel, build an audience, make weird videos in your bedroom, and then end up directing a box office hit. This year, some of Hollywood's biggest surprise successes have come from filmmakers who learned their craft online, not in Hollywood, but on YouTube. Our next report tells you more.
Once upon a time, YouTube was where people uploaded cat videos.
Imagine being able to build an app with your name on it, just by thinking about it. Meet Base 44, a complete
Hollywood directors, and not just directors, box office winners. This year has seen a remarkable shift. Several of the most talked about films of 2026 have been made by creators who built their followings online. There is Markiplier, best known for playing video games on YouTube. His film, Iron Lung, became a surprise theatrical success. Then there is Curry Barker, who went from comedy sketches online to directing Obsession, a low-budget film that has become one of the biggest box office stories of the year. And then there is Kane Parsons, just 20 years old, who turned his viral YouTube series Backrooms into a feature film. And now it is outperforming big studio releases. In fact, Backrooms has opened bigger than some of this year's most established franchises, and it is on track to become one of the biggest hits in the history of its studio. So what is going on? Is YouTube the new film school? Maybe, but not in the way people think. YouTube does not teach cinematography. It does not hand out directing degrees, and it certainly does not teach screenwriting. But what it does teach is audience behavior. It teaches attention, pacing, hooks, suspense, and perhaps most importantly, it teaches creators how to keep people watching. For an entire generation, that is the most valuable skill in entertainment. And there's another reason these filmmakers are breaking through. Most of them work in horror. Horror has quietly become Hollywood's best business model. You do not need a $200 million budget. You do not need a superhero. You do not even need a big star. You just need one good idea. And younger filmmakers often understand what scares their generation better than any studio executive ever could. That is why films like Backrooms resonate. They feel like they were born on the internet, because they were. They speak the language of memes, of viral culture, of digital anxiety, of the strange liminal spaces that Gen Z grew up in. And yet, the most interesting part of the story is not that YouTubers are making movies. It is that people are actually leaving YouTube to watch them. For years, we were told that Gen Z had no attention span, that young people only wanted short videos, that cinema was dying, that the future was endless scrolling. Apparently not. Because thousands of young people are buying tickets, sitting in dark theaters, and watching movies made by people they first discovered online. That is a remarkable reversal. In a way, this is not really a story about YouTube. It's a story about cinema, about how film continues to reinvent itself. Every generation finds a new way in. Once it was theater, then film school, then music videos. Now it is YouTube. The platform may change, the technology may change, the audience may change, but the dream remains exactly the same: to tell a story and find an audience, and to make a movie people actually want to watch. As it turns out, the kids who grew up making videos for the internet might just be Hollywood's next generation of directors.
Elon Musk may soon become the world's first trillionaire thanks to a possible SpaceX IPO, but the internet isn't waiting for the stock market to decide. Social media users are already imagining life in the $1 trillion club. One post joked by stating that the world's first trillionaire just sits around and retweets memes all day. Some even warned that he is using people's retirement savings to fund his trillionaire dream. The IPO hasn't happened yet, but the memes are already fully valued. At First Post, we believe the most compelling stories come from the people who shaped them. That is the idea behind our new series, The Champion Code. It is a podcast that explores the mindset of sporting greats.
Okay, so you see some of the latest developments in the news today. Obviously, a lot to track and follow. That SpaceX IPO is supposed to be pretty exciting, so definitely keep an eye out on that. That's gonna be exciting. So it'd be interesting to see whether or not Elon Musk actually does become the first trillionaire. But there are a number of other things that I thought was quite interesting. The YouTube movement, specifically for this generation, seems to be where Hollywood could source new talent. Sometimes you can't learn half the things that you would learn in a college or a university. I mean, I think sometimes the universities, kind of scam people into believing they are going to somehow get them ahead by giving them a degree, but there's no guarantees that that's actually going to yield any results. And I'm proud of the people who's been able to break through straight off of YouTube. I think that then will open up new opportunities for other creators to get deals with Hollywood, right? People who are creative and who can reimagine how to convey a message and a story. Those people will hopefully have a new avenue to express themselves to the masses. So I thought that was pretty cool. That's it for me on this side. I hope you guys got something from this particular episode. I pray that all is well. Again, I ask if you guys are not already connected to our channel, definitely like and subscribe to the channel, and also stay connected. Weigh in, leave a comment. Again, I appreciate your feedback, and stay connected so we can continue to make good, entertaining videos for you guys. That's as informative as well. All right, guys, have a blessed day. Bye-bye.